Welcome to Practical Access. I'm Lisa Dieker.
And I'm Rebecca Hines. And Lisa, tell us a little bit about what to expect in this episode.
Yeah, so we're really excited. We have a great guest with us today that can talk about a lot of topics. We have with us Dr. Lindsey Massengale, who is an instructor, a virtual tutor, and we have to thank her for being a military spouse and thank her husband for her service to this country. But Lindsey also is very open about having her own unique mobility challenges in life, and she's going to highlight some of those for us. So, Becky, you want to start us off with a question? Welcome, Lindsey. We're glad you're here.
Hi, Lindsey.
Hi, Becky.
So I'm wondering, that I have a nephew with cerebral palsy, and he has significant mobility issues and lots of, communications issues, et cetera. So as a family member, it's always interesting to me to hear the stories of others and kind of the kinds of considerations as you navigate a world that wasn't necessarily designed for people with mobility differences. And I thought maybe you could share with us a little bit about what you've encountered along the way, both here in the United States, but I know you have an international background as well. Can you give us an idea of kind of navigating things in our society?
Well, first and foremost, with my experience, I navigate with my eyes before I really go to navigate, and a lot of times I will go test out something before I actually have to engage in that area, whether I'm by myself or with a trusted friend or family member, in case I run into I need help. In the United States, it's pretty easy, and I know how to use my voice to go, hey, this is a big access point for everyone, no matter your ability. Where else can somebody get in the building? For example, there was a handicap access to a university I taught at, but it was all the way on the side that I said, nah, I don't want to use that access because it's too far.
Mm-hmm.
So I have learned to say, hey, I need to have access somewhere. One of the things growing up is during fire drills, which is a huge thing for me. Not only do I not like the noise, where am I going? Let's practice without any sound. Now I'm fine with it. Being a teacher, you're just used to it. And the school actually had a code where they'd kind of come and nod and say, and I'm like, why are you twitching? And then I realized she's nodding towards the alarm. So I knew, okay, it's going to go off. Prepare yourself so you can prepare your kids. But when I was in middle school, we realized that my exit for fire drills did not have a curb cut out for me to safely cross the street.
Mm-hmm.
It took the entire year for my family to get them to cut out a curb cutout so I could safely do fire drills with my class, because the fire department said, let a child walk by themselves to go find the curb cutout and then circle back and find their class.
Right.
Not going to work. But overseas, I've always had to have a buddy either with me or meet me there. Now, as a child overseas, I had a one-on-one aide that actually lived with us. Once I got into the school environment, I knew where I was, and I crawled around before I learned how to walk. My teachers knew me, so I was pretty much okay, but she was there to help me navigate the halls and the stairways and everything like that, because I couldn't do it independently. Now, when I've traveled for trips, I've had a buddy with me meet me there, because I could navigate the airport with wheelchairs, but what do I do to get out into the parking lot, and the language barrier, and I don't like it when somebody grabs when I'm not falling.
Right.
It's just basically the language barrier, but really looking at how to get around, and not only getting around, it's really understanding that third world countries see me as somebody who, why are you even out in society?
Mm. So there's a big difference just in not only in the architecture and design for people with differences. There's a wide difference internationally, but also just in terms of beliefs and understanding and inclusivity. I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, that idea of using your eyes first to come up literally with a plan for being mobile. And I think that's a great takeaway for teachers or parents, is that idea, the extra level of planning that's needed, and helping kids start to think about that.
And that was not something that came up with just me. That was actually something I learned back in PT. They would set up different, let's just say, obstacle courses, because a lot of things are obstacle courses to me that you might think are a walk in the park. And then they'd say, okay, before you move around, how are you going to navigate? Tell me what you're going to do before you do it.
That's awesome.
Great suggestion. So one of the things I know is you've had some unique, as you said, being out in society looked at a little differently. Do you have any unique stories? Because one of the things I know about you, you're a 3-time UCF Knight, and we're very proud of that fact, having got your doctorate here. You don't lack for the ability to advocate. I would say that your parents created a lion for advocacy. Not only is that what you write about and you do, but what are some examples of times that you had, or maybe a couple personal examples of where you really used your advocacy skills, or you really were perceived differently and kind of used that as an opportunity of learning for you?
Well, one of the things, starting from the very, very beginning, before I even realized that I was different, because I was not raised as a different individual, as we were, I don't remember which trip to Russia it was. My dad was only supposed to be there for 2 years, but then they couldn't find anybody to replace him, so they asked him to stay for 2 more. And yeah, that was fun. Granted, I was really young. We were there between my ages of 4 and 8, but we were going through airport security at the time. I've never had a wheelchair. They had a gigantic mesh stroller for me. Just think stroller, but think huge. And we are going through the security checkpoint, and the security officers say, wheelchair coming through. I don't realize they're talking about me right away. So they do their whole thing. We get to our gate. I say to Mom, what is a wheelchair? It was that moment that Mom and Dad had to explain to me as best that they could that, hey, I don't know the tools that I'm using, because to me they are normal. So to hear somebody use, because we just called it a stroller, and learning what is a wheelchair, and that first exposure of, yes, you are different, but we, your family, don't treat you any differently unless it's to help you succeed.
Yeah, and that's who you are. So that's kind of taking you not only through 4 to 8-year-olds, but let's fast forward to today. You are an advocate. You do virtual tutoring. You teach online. What is your message to others that maybe aren't as comfortable with who they are? Because you may be the most comfortable person I've ever met in accepting your differences as a strength and as an asset. What is your advice to somebody else who's like, gosh, I don't know how to disclose or to advocate? What's your suggestion to them?
First and foremost, my suggestion is disclose when you feel that it is absolutely necessary. I look at it as a need to know basis. Even the school that I taught at previously, My principal didn't know until I shook his hand. And then he literally goes, whoa. So it's a need to know, and it's also, I have to remind myself, it's a need to know for your own safety. Do they need to know because, okay, I'm going mountain climbing and I'm off balance and I'm going to need help with something? Is it a need to know for your own safety? And is it a need to know, let's just say, is it a need to know for your benefit?
Right.
And to benefit them.
What if somebody were discriminating against you? That's something I know about you. Let's take like the bus loop that doesn't work. What is your first step of action that you recommend people do?
For discriminating?
Yes.
I would friendly conversation, say, hey, this is how you have made me feel. This is what I would rather you do. Because there's the society's eyes and the society's voice, but then there's the individual's voice. It is your instinct, but then it is the individual's preference. Like, I know I've had some conversations with you that you've learned some different things of stepping in and helping and when not. But yes, help, but help when the individual is ready. Unless there is immediate danger in the way.
Well, I think that's actually great advice. And to kind of start to transition into some areas that are actually your expertise and your interests. I know that your mom actually wrote a book. My daughter taught me to walk. And I believe that she actually told some of the stories and some of the struggles and, different encounters that you've had along the way. But let's kind of transition a little bit into your professional interest, that interest of literacy and writing. And, so tell me, maybe you could tie a little bit, what did your mom's book mean to you? But you could also take it as a work of literature. Kind of tie that together for us.
My mom's book I did not know she wrote the book until it was almost finished, because she had some questions for me. They had every name that you used, you had to get permission to use. And reading through the book after it was published, I learned a lot, because I didn't realize, I knew my parents fought for me, but I didn't realize the advocacy that they did for me to get me to where I am today. So it was a learning experience for me, and it's also, I start mentioning it to really good friends that I know, because I want them to accept it for the stories that it is and not just read it as another book. And then they ask me questions about it, because it sparks where we've been all over the world. One of my friends has had similar stories to what's in it, so that was a really neat common ground with it. I learned a lot from it, and my mom taught me actually how to write from the very, very, very young age. And I've fallen in love with writing ever since probably elementary school. I was always writing something.
Well, and I think you've really taken that passion for writing and advocacy that's in your mom's book and kind of made it your professional career. Share with us advice of how families might use writing, whether their child has the ability to write, maybe they need to use speech to text. How do you see writing as a way to advocate and to communicate for people with a range of needs, including those with cerebral palsy?
I see writing as first and foremost an outlet. If you can't say it with your voice, write it down. I have always, one of the phrases I started using with my students is, you always have a voice. In this classroom, your voice might be your voice, and your voice might be your pencil. Especially if we were taking a test and they wanted to raise their hand and shout out the answer. I said, nope, your pencil is your voice. So you always have your voice. Just what is the modality of your voice? Write it down. I even tell my students I'm not paying attention to you, but I'm writing something down so I don't forget later on. Even to go as far as the most common is journaling. Write something down so you remember to tell somebody. Write something down to say, hey, this was a struggle today, but maybe in a week you're like, wow, I've overcome this. Writing helps set goals and to let you see where you are and where you're going.
And as a classroom teacher, and this is kind of my last question, Becky, if you have any other wrap-up questions, as a classroom teacher, how do I give voice to kids who maybe are silent in both writing and in speaking in my classroom? What are some of your tips, practical tips to give kids a voice?
I would say drawing is still a voice. I would say if they wanted to act something out. I had a specific student who could hear you if his hearing aids were in, but if he forgot his hearing aids, he'd mime for me. And I got used to understanding that there is always a way. I've had kids use different hand motions, even if it's not true sign language. You get to know your students. One of the teachers would tease me and say, you're proficient in Anthony, because it was the name of the student. Because it's like getting to know your own children. You get to know how they interact and what they need and how they're trying to express it to you. So reading and writing, the actual acts that we think that they can be done in a lot of different ways. We just have to figure out what is that unique way for that student.
And Lindsey, as we wrap up, I'm just curious. I know that you have a PhD. I know you have experience in the classroom, and I know you've lived a military wife experience at this point. But what's next? What's next for you?
What's next is I am actually in the midst of getting ready to launch my own online website business that will let me be a listening ear or a voice and continue tutoring for others. It's called Journeying Through Learning. And my phrasing with it is, let me meet you where you are and let's journey together. So I want to be, with whatever I'm doing, it's always, what do you want to do now? I'm still thinking about it. Mm-hmm. I always want to be that helpful hand that if I don't have the answer today, let's team together and figure it out.
So I did say I was done, but I really do have one question I want to ask you now that I think about it. Sorry, and it really will be my last question, I promise. What do you think it means when a kid walks in and sees your unique challenges? As you said, they can be hidden on camera, but when I walk in a room, mm-hmm. I see kind of some of the physical mobility challenges. What do you think that means to students when they see you as a teacher?
I actually, Lisa, have a story to that one.
Okay.
It was the end of the year, my last year at the school that I was previously at, and I said to the students, what is something you learned this year? And I'm expecting them to say adding, subtracting, animals, the typical first grade answers. One of my students stood up and said, Dr. Massengale, you taught us it is okay to be different. I had to take a minute and go, whoa, that came from a first grader. But I think they see the difference, and yes, they're curious with it. I love all the questions. It's how you ask the question. Depends on how I answer it and if I answer it. But their curiosity is necessary because I may be the only one they run into like this. I may be one of many that I want to be the role model for them and have them not be afraid of working with, being around somebody who is different. Because in a way, we are all different, but what is your difference?
Well, with that, I think I'll leave it at that. Well said. As always, we're very excited that you're our colleague, our friend, and a role model for advocacy in the field. And we thank you for joining us on Practical Access. Please post questions or comments on our Facebook page and send us a tweet at Access Practical. Thanks, Lindsey.
Thank you.